All right, fantastic. Thank you for watching that last video. This is going to be lecture 23, and we're going to emphasize the last bullet point of the phase 2. And we're going to say once a stock sells out of its IPO and a buyer wishes to buy it, he or she must buy that stock from the for sale market. And what's interesting about this is if you think about very traditional stocks like Apple Computer, for example, I believe that Apple had its initial public offering in 1982. And that number sticks in my mind. The very early 80s stock when I was just a tiny thing, just a nothing. I was 9 or 8 or 9. Now what's interesting now is that initially when Apple was given out as an IPO, they probably sold something to the order of 15 million shares in Apple. And now it would have been good to buy Apple back in those days. You would have had to wait a couple of generations for it to be what it is now. But what's interesting is that there was an investment bank that did that tech IPO, right, that made Apple initially available. But let's just say that bank was the initial holder of that stock, and that individuals would buy Apple stock initially from that seller on its IPO day and then forthwith. Now, however, if you want to buy a share of Apple, you actually don't go to that bank because that bank has long since sold all of their Apple stock. Now other people own those Apple shares, and they may have done some stock splits. I know they did a stock split recently. So there may be 30 odd million shares of Apple, or however many there are shares out in the world. Now, if you wanted to buy some Apple, most likely if you said, hi, I want to buy 5 shares of Apple, you would be buying those 5 shares from a person somewhere. And the stock market works like a big Craigslist, and it says, okay, I have this person right here who has 5 shares to sell within the price range that you are okay with, so you buy from this person. And then once your transaction clears, that money is debited back to the seller. And that's what the market does. That's what the market's business is. So that being the case, you guys have a very rich for sale market that gets created during the build random portfolio phase. And we just went over that in the prior video, so we won't go over that too much. But right now, we need to begin the process of saying, okay, if you're going to build a portfolio and you find that the IPO quantity of that stock is 0, then what you should try to do is to take a look in the for sale market that may well exist within this market. And then if the symbol in that transaction equals the symbol of the stock that you're trying to buy, you're inserting this into your build random portfolio. If that's the case, then you should set up the number that you plan to purchase. And then if the number of your stock purchase is greater than or if, for example, the number of the stock purchased in your transaction is greater than the number to purchase, which is a variable that you've set earlier, right here, number to purchase, then what I want you to do is I want you to add that to a possible list of choices. And another option is you just go ahead and buy it. Like, shoot, let's not hold back. Why don't you just go ahead and add that transaction T, it's your portfolio right then and there. That would probably be a reasonable way to solve phase 2 completely, because you've said, hey, I'm not able to buy that stock directly because of its IPO. But if it's inside of the for sale market, I'm going to buy that thing instead. Now what it does is it opens up the potential for somebody else to make some money. From money to pass from this buyer's hands into the seller's hands, and for their budget to grow. So that would be a nice way to close up this phase. And I was going to recommend to embed that choice within try catch with a catch right there. And that would just be a little bit of code that would get interjected into here. Some things that I'm looking at specifically is I want to look inside of the stock process, and I want to address the IPO quantity, because the IPO quantity gets created but I'm not sure if my IPO quantity gets subtracted. So after we actually do a sale, does IPO quantity get changed? And so one of the things I want to look at here, and maybe we can address it in the next video, and I just want to put this out here as some things to think about is, okay, if IPO quantity is public, then after we finish up a sale, maybe we should minus or subtract, IPO quantity. So frankly, for this kind of a condition to be true, if you ever sell out, well, probably you need to keep track of that IPO quantity. So we probably need to say, if you're going to add that transaction, probably you want to say L.IPO quantity is equal to IPO quantity minus T dot num stock purchased, something along those lines. And this should be a way to reduce the number of available shares. So I hope that that's okay, and we can definitely discuss that as we go. But I want to say thank you for sticking with this problem. I really respect your willingness to stick with a problem that is professional size, that has hundreds and hundreds of lines, and to stick with it for weeks and weeks and weeks. In many ways, a programmer is really just a person who agrees to persisting, agrees to sticking with something. Programming is a lot of fun. Programming is great. There's nothing quite like making a program come together. There's a lot of intellectual satisfaction. The MIT people, who have made, who've written the Tao of programming, really say that, one should program every 3 days in order to remain a happy person. Programming is just a way to be an intellectually satisfied person. But I really appreciate having you stuck with this problem, and you'll be rewarded for this. One way or another, it'll change the way that you approach living. When I visit with programmers, I find that they are willing to study any worldly phenomenon. There's nothing that frightens them off. They're willing to look at law, they're willing to look at science, they're willing to look at just about anything. And they figure if they can just study just about anything the way that they study programs, pretty much once you deal with programs, everything is available to you. Most people chicken out of programming. Just understand that there's a lot of brilliant biology students who have really said, oh, programming is too hard. I'm shocked at that because biology is a difficult subject. Bio is a truly difficult subject to study. And when bio people are chickening out of programming, boy, that must say something. There are some people who would prefer to be a scientist and would prefer to be a really an expert observer rather than being a creator. Programmers are mad scientist creators. And so I want to compliment you for getting this far. Shoot, 23 videos? This is your 23rd, so that's a lot. So stick with it. Replay this one a few times. Think about some of the building blocks and understand that you can do this final bullet. And I want to slow down over this code so that you maybe pause this slide by undergoing some of this kind of reasoning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward. I'm going to debug and run this code a little bit, and then maybe we can catch up with a solution in the next movie.